Hey you! Do you need help keeping your stitches straight?
Hello, I'm Allie, literary sewist. Here in my crafting castle, I create projects inspired by the books I read. Today in this video, I'm going to answer the #1 question that I see asked in every single sewing group. How the heck do you sew a straight line? So if you have wobbly sewing lines, come with me. And be sure to stick around for the end where I share 3 tips the pros never tell beginners.
Try using the markings on your machine's needle plate. Even if the numbers aren't listed, your needle plate will have markings. This is a typical way that people learn to follow a seam allowance guide. Just line up the edge of your fabric with the mark that matches your seam allowance, then keep it lined up while you sew. Pros, it's included with your machine and no obstructions. Cons, easily covered by fabric, can wear down over time and requires a steady hand. Try using a bit of elastic. Wrap elastic around the base of your machine, make sure it's a little snug, then sew the elastic loop closed. Slide the elastic loop over your machine, line it up with the seam allowance mark, then you can sew. Pros, elastic is cheap, easy to create, and it's a very obvious marker. Cons, it can slide if not tight enough and can stretch out over time. Try using a magnetic seam guide. These little gadgets have a strong magnet that will hold steady in place. They can also be adjusted to help with curved seams, but that's a different video. You'll place it on the metal needle plate, then line it up with your seam allowance mark. You may need to wiggle them over just because they're quite strong. Pros, they're very strong and won't budge, great for multiple layers and adjustable for curves. Cons, won't attach to plastic surfaces and not useful for extra wide hems, and may cause damage to digital machines. Try using a sticky seam guide. These seam guides have a strong sticky backside. Peel off the plastic sheet before placing them on your seam allowance mark. The twin guide can be lined up together or placed on opposite side of the presser foot if you're working with straps. Be sure to replace the plastic covers when you're done to help keep the sticky strong as possible. Pros, won't budge, they're great for multiple layers, and will stick to plastic surfaces. Cons, the sticky will wear down over time, typically pricier than other options, and hard to readjust once set down. Try using washi tape or painter's tape. This is another easy and cheap option. Just rip off a piece of tape and line it up with your seam allowance mark. Just line up the edge of your fabric with the tape along your seam allowance, then keep it lined up while you sew. Pros, it's cheap and easy and you can use pretty tape, and it doesn't leave residue behind. Cons, tape doesn't last very long. You'll need to replace the tape often. Try using a seam guide presser foot. If your machine didn't come with one, you should be able to order one that is compatible with your machine. Replace your standard presser foot with this one, then you can adjust the marker on the side. This guide will slide along the edge of your fabric as you sew. Pros, it's designed for your machine, easy to use with its own markers, and notches to hold the guide in place. Cons, not good with wide hems, may be pricey depending on your machine, and the plastic can loosen over time. Try using Legos? Yes, Legos. Shout out to all my crafty thinkers out there. This will work just like the sticky seam guide. Just add your own double-sided tape to the back. I love this idea because I've had Legos in my home as long as I can remember, even before I had kids. Really, you can just do this with any straight small object, so let your crafty side shine and I'd love to see what you come up with. Be sure to tag me in your photos. Pros, you can use anything you have on hand and it's cheap and easy. Cons, you'll have to replace the tape often. You may have to look around for the right object and definitely don't step on them. And now for 3 tips the pros don't tell beginners, but I will. Some machines have adjustable needles, or they are off-center just a little bit. So you should always check your seam allowance. Put the needle down, then use a ruler to place your markers. Alternatively, you can get a seam allowance ruler, place it under the presser foot, insert the needle into the hole that matches your seam allowance, then lay down your seam allowance guide of choice. Keeping your eye on the edge of the fabric and not the needle will go a long way to keeping those stitches straight. It's a bit cliche, but practice makes perfect.
And the biggest secret of all? We don't always sew straight lines. It's okay to be a little off. It's these flaws that make handmade so fabulous. So don't stress yourself out as long as you're reasonably close. Yeah, that's right. I'm talking to you perfectionists out there. I will have links for all of these tools in the description below for you so you can grab one for yourself. And if this video was helpful at all, please give us a thumbs up. Then pop on over here for even more sewing tips and tricks. See you next time.